Hey guys, today I'm interviewing Drew Brucker, the VP Growth at Lasso. I'm getting his story as to how he went from a sales rep for the St. Louis Cardinals all the way up to a marketing leader. I'm going to get his top tips on leadership, the traits of a marketing leader, and even things as to how to manage up and how to do internal marketing. Hope you guys enjoy. All right, Drew, thanks for connecting today. I appreciate you giving the time here. I would really love for you to start by explaining a bit about yourself. Maybe if you can walk us through your journey all the way from sales rep for the St. Louis Cardinals all the way to VP growth at Lasso today.
Yeah, long story. So we'll try to keep it very short. But I think like the key point is I had no idea what I wanted to do out of college, right? My major ultimately does not align to what I do now, which I think is the case with a lot of people. I started out in sales, and one of my first gigs was in sports, which is sort of a part of my major in college. And it was just an awesome experience. I'm still very passionate about sports, but just quickly realized, right, there's probably not a lot of money there, and moved on in that journey and relocated to Atlanta, and just found myself in a couple of sales roles that probably, I slowly realized this is probably not the right fit for me. A lot of cold calling for yellow page ads and things of that nature. So really hard and just challenging things right out of school. And I just thought to myself, surely this is not what I'm supposed to be doing. And so, I continued to kind of go down the sales path, but try to find a role that was a little bit more aligned to, I think, my personality and what I was striving for. And so I did find that in property management. That was leasing apartments and meeting with people face to face. And I started doing that. And it was a big step back in terms of, compensation and what I was making. But I basically made a deal with myself that I'm going to pursue this because I do feel like my quality of life will be better. Right. So I
Mhm.
pulled the trigger on that, went down that route, ultimately became, very successful doing sales in property management. I was working for one of the larger, like 4 or 5 companies in property management at that time, and was a top seller, gained a nice reputation, and ultimately got tasked with selling up and leasing up one of the most luxurious properties here in Atlanta in one of the company's biggest projects, and took that challenge on. And it sort of rolled itself into my marketing role because I took that sales experience that I gained and all those other characteristics, and I sort of turned that into a marketing role in property management. And when I did that, I quickly realized, like, marketing is such this vast landscape. I'm a curious person. I wanted to know everything. And just right away, I just felt like this is the spot for me. And so I just kind of went down that rabbit hole and spent some time at, that property management company, ultimately turned into working in SaaS and tech and the startup environment, and have been doing that for the last 5 or 6 years, specifically with B2B SaaS. And it's been a hell of a ride, where right now I'm VP of growth for a company called Lasso, and we've got some really exciting things going, and a great team. And I'm just really happy with where I'm at, both in my life and my career.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, great summary. It's funny. I actually started the first year of my career cold calling as well. So I knew pretty quickly it wasn't for me either, but it's an experience that I wouldn't trade for anything. So I want to kind of dive into one of your next experiences at RAM Partners. It looks like you made a big jump there from a digital marketing specialist all the way up to director. Can you tell me about that jump and maybe walk me through the skills that were necessary for you to make that jump?
Yeah. So I was just going into making the jump from sales to marketing. And really, the only skill set I had that I could say was directly related to marketing was social media at that time. And I had done some training for property management, which was starting to, this was sort of like the Facebook era, right? And sort of how can we leverage this as a business tool era. And so I was teaching folks internally in property management about how to use something like Facebook for the business, right? How to drive leads, maybe set up ads, right? How to post on social media just organically. And so when I stepped into this role, that was where I started. That was my foundation. I got lucky in the sense that this company knew the reputation I had as a seller, but was also taking a chance on me and my curious mind to figure it out on the marketing side. I was trying to figure out what I didn't know. I knew I knew this, but I didn't know how big the marketing landscape was. I didn't know, all the facets of it at that time. I didn't know any strategical lever pulls or anything like that. I had no experience to really go with. And so all I had was the action toward bias and the curiosity to ask questions and figure things out, right? And
Right.
not be afraid to fail. And so that's ultimately what I leaned on. And with this company, talking about that jump, right, which
Hmm.
was from this entry level specialist to a director, it was basically a compliment of, hey, I've made this much progress in terms of what value I can bring to the company. I was already the sole marketer for this company at a national level. I was sitting in the corporate office and I
Right.
was working with the area vice presidents. But I think over time, I was able to prove and show the value of what I was doing, and it was working. And so I had the experience, the aspects of working on site at these properties because I'd been there. I'd been the seller. I had known problems that existed. I had known the objections that come into place. And I was able to kind of like filter that through a lens and think now as a marketer instead of a seller. Right.
Right.
And so I think that really helped me get off to a fast start. And then I had some really good programs that I was able to put together and prove value. So one of those being reviews. Reviews at that time, a lot of people weren't talking about in terms of, hey, this is how I make decisions. With something like an apartment, right? It's like people will go, and before they're going to start spending thousands of dollars living somewhere, they want to know that this is a great place, right? And what's
Totally.
that threshold of what's not good enough for me, right? What can I afford and what's not good enough for me? And I really drilled into that. There was a company, and I think they still do this, that was sort of in charge of online reputation for property management companies. And there were national rankings for this.
Hmm.
It just started. We were nowhere on the list. Our properties were in pretty bad shape. A lot of just reacting to posts, right? There were no proactive strategies for online reputation that these property managers or leasing consultants were putting in place. And so what I quickly realized is if I can train these folks how to actively ask, right, for reviews,
Hmm.
just like you'd ask for referrals or anything like that, there are a lot of benefits that come out of that. One, if you ask for it, you're going to get more anyway. Two, by getting more and you asking for it most of the time, they're going to feel compelled to give you a favorable review,
Hmm.
right? Also, you're not just limiting yourself in a reactive state to what's coming in the door because people don't leave reviews unless they're pissed about something, at least at that time, right? No one was going out of their way to say, hey, I love living here. 5 stars, recommend anybody. You had to pull those things out of people. And so I just really drilled into that as an example. And we ran that, I ran that play with all of our area vice presidents, got on calls, did trainings, and we went from unranked to top 5 ranking in a year, right? And
Wow.
so it was like, hey, here's the value because we can't totally quantify it in terms of how much business we're potentially losing by being a 3.2 star versus a 4.4, but there's enough data and insights out there to show us how people make decisions to realize that that number's pretty big.
Right.
So it were programs like that I just selectively realized and chose to drill deep into and prove the value. And at the end of the day, those were the things that allowed me to get that jump. And I just thought to myself, hey, look, like I don't feel like a specialist anymore. And I am in charge of this program and that program. And I'm working with the area vice presidents. And I know that my boss and others think I'm doing a killer job. So let me present what I think I should be. What should my title be? What,
Right.
like, and so I sort of, at the time, I guess that was pretty risky, but like I
Hmm.
went and I said, hey, look, like I would like to review my compensation. Here's what I've delivered, right? Here's what other people in my role may make. And then I think this role, just given its cross-departmental, functionality and communication,
Hmm.
really is more aligned to this. What do you guys think? Do you think that's fair? Right. And ultimately that's how I was able to make that first connection. And the reason why that's important is yes, titles don't fully matter, but they absolutely do matter because that was a perception and a credibility thing that I needed in my hat because in my mind, I was already behind. I had already spent so many years in sales that I'm trying to catch up on marketing side now, right?
Right.
And I felt like by doing something like that, it was really an opportunity for me to expedite the process, right? Of me climbing this ladder and just, diving deeper into the marketing world. So I know that's a little bit of a long answer, but just want to sort of paint that picture a little bit.
That's great. Seems like you really leaned into what you were already good at and what you already knew and use that to propel yourself and keep proving results as you moved up. And I like that last piece about, just really asking for where you think you're at, not just taking the logical next step that they throw your way. Would you call yourself a marketing generalist just based off your titles? Or would you say you're stronger in certain areas? So do you have that T shape? And then, as a generalist, how do you elevate yourself, even though you have a very broad set of responsibilities?
I think now of generalist and T-shaped kind of being synonymous in my mind. Yes, like I am deeper in some areas for sure. But I'm definitely a generalist. And the reason for that is just like this first role in marketing, I've usually been either a sole marketer or a part of a small marketing team of no more than, I think the largest team I've ever been on in marketing capacity was like 6.
Yep.
So all small teams. And so when you're in those type of situations, it's all about agility, using the resources you have and scaling and thinking smarter about prioritization. What should I focus on and how, for example, if I'm thinking about content, producing content ad hoc isn't a great use of my time. I need to think about how can I basically front load content in order to scale it to maximize the potential for it, because
Right.
it's about the quality, but it's also about the quantity. And especially on those small teams, you probably don't have much content, a lot of situations that I came into. So definitely more of, I would say, that generalist perspective. I go pretty deep on, I would say, the creative side of being a marketer. I have a feeling you're probably going to dive into, hey, look, like, how do you solve, for things along the way? It's for me, I've always been strong on the creative side in trying to shore up the analytical side.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just an abstract thinker. I'm very creative. I think in another world, I'd be some sort of artist or something. Like it's just such an itch that I always have to scratch. And for me, like any creative component, like brand, content, copywriting, ad creative, website, UX, UI, all those components speak to me very deeply.
Talking about things like your analytical side, have you had to bring yourself up to a skill level or skill set just to stay on par as a VP growth?
Yeah, because you'll right when you become the team leader, there are metrics that you need to report on,
Yeah.
and it's no longer about your manager on the marketing team, for example, knowing your value. And I think you also can get trapped right in a smaller environment. Like reporting is important, but it's probably not as important as it is in a bigger company because you've got more resources. People are a little bit more zoned in on what they're working on, and there's just more time for that. Whereas when you get in these small teams, you're scrambling, you're trying to get projects off the ground, things are time sensitive,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes that can fall off the radar or at least off the front burner, right? So it's maybe not
Right.
the most important thing. And so I think you absolutely have to be thinking analytical if you're someone like me, and it's just going to come, right? If you're continuing to climb up that ladder of being a leader or who you're reporting to, and that's absolutely been the case for me. So I think what that looks like is making sure you're not just a product of who's at your company to learn that from. And I think that's important to ask those questions and be a little bit vulnerable to figure those things out. But
Mhm.
you do need to be somebody that is a go-getter and figures that out on their own as well, right? So I think that curiosity part really plays into, hey, what is it that I don't know? So turning those unknown unknowns into known unknowns and then
Yep.
solving for it.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I'd love to go even a step deeper on that one. So, we originally had talked about you have this broad set of responsibilities, things like, SEO, email, paid ads, right? You have to have eyes on all these things. And there's no way anyone could know all this or be an expert in all of it. So how have you gone about just getting that baseline understanding of a lot of these different facets?
One of the first really good steps I made was in one role, I was working for a company called Rainmaker Group, who eventually was acquired by a company called RealPage, and they're a big player in the SaaS side of property management. I walked in that company, right? I knew a lot in terms of what I knew on the property management side, but then you turn that into a B2B SaaS company that's selling technology. And, I remember walking in there and just, wow, like so many smart people. And then really realizing quick, holy shit, there's still a lot I have no idea about. Right. And so, and that was also part of the reason I took the role too, is I was in a very great spot at RAM. I didn't need to leave. I pushed myself to leave because I recognized I wanted to keep growing and learning. And part of that was taking, a little bit of a risk, an uncomfortable risk to test myself.
Mm-hmm.
And in doing that, right, like just realize there are so many things out there to learn. So, when I was working at Rainmaker, it once I sort of, I guess, got up to speed with what I was doing there, what my role was, the projects I would be involved in, I was still thinking very much like a beginner in terms of what else is it that I don't know, but maybe I'm just not responsible for here.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect example of that was like running ad campaigns. It's like, I'm not running ad campaigns here, but we're also not doing that. And we don't have anybody that's doing that here. I wonder if I can learn that, And so I did the digging, right? I did the research. I started watching YouTube things, was reading everything I could on it. And then what I would do is like, I started an LLC and I started taking on freelance projects to do the things that I wasn't doing in my other role. And look, I'm not saying that's for everybody, but for me, like I was still late 20s, right? Like I had that grind to just want to figure it out. And so I took on some clients doing things like paid ads, right? Like a social media strategy, some of these other things that I wasn't touching day to day. And that helped sort of round out everything.
Love that. So yeah, you found that side project was really able, kind of forced you to work on those skills that you maybe just weren't working on every day in your role.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So next thing I want to chat about is managing up and internal marketing. Let's start with managing up. What are your strategies? Well, I guess it'd be important to know, who you report to right now, and then what are your strategies for managing up?
I report to our president and CRO right now. And, I think when it comes to managing up, it's really in the word. You have to be proactive about it. Don't just take if you're jumping into a new role, right? Your manager is going to have some ideas as to what your communication with them looks like. They're going to have some things that they need from you, but you need to view that as a two-way street. What do you need from them? How are you going to maybe solve some of the unknowns in your head? So, for example, early on, I would wonder, hey, look, am I working on the right things? Am I prioritizing the right things in real time? And so, I would take advantage of those types of things in my one-on-ones and asking, hey, look, these are my priorities that I've set up for this week. Here's why. Does this feel right to you? Or if I've got too much on my plate, right? Like, hey, look, like I've got this, and this. Realistically, we have the bandwidth for this and this. What should I prioritize? Like, what should be the top two priorities for that week? And so I think thinking about things like that is a great way to manage up. And so I try to take control of that time with my manager. And I feel like that's my meeting to own. And, just filling in the gaps, right? So making sure I'm working in an automated, empowered fashion, but also keeping my boss in the know. So that may be
Right.
just little notes here and there and taking some things into my one-on-one as a status check. But I also try not to make my one-on-one just a status check because it's
Yep.
much more than that.
Yep. Love that. And then on the other side, internal marketing. So marketing to the rest of whether it's the marketing team or, sales, tech, whoever, what are some of your strategies for that? And really making people believe and trust that you guys are doing the things you need to be doing.
We've really found a really nice rhythm at Lasso. And I think that's just a combination of things I've learned in the past. I've also learned at Lasso and just since I started in terms of what the right cadence is and what works for us, right?
Mhm.
Nothing is universal. You have to apply it to your own team. But what works for us is we do a daily stand up with just our team where it's a little bit more status check in on our top priorities for that day, right? It's just very quick, a little bit of context, right? Here's where my focus is at today. If we've got some qualifying questions, we get to them, and then that's it, right? So we all know what's important day to day, number one.
Mhm.
Number two, like I meet with my one-on-ones and I facilitate that same style that I just described to you. I put the one-on-one in their hands. I don't want this to be about me asking, hey, what's the status on project A, B, C, D? Let's talk through each one. That's the default habit. And I think there is part of the meeting that's a place for that. But for me, it's much more about wanting to understand what's on their mind, getting to talk about things that aren't necessarily even related to work, like just building trust and rapport.
Mhm.
And then lastly, what we do as a team is like in the middle of our week, we do a longer session. It's just an hour session, but that's where we talk through if we've got campaigns, if we've got any sort of like analyzation of reporting, if we've got a 2 week look ahead, if we need help or want to highlight anything, that's where we get together as a group and talk through those things in a little bit more depth. So,
Mhm.
you stack those things up, right? We're talking daily. I've got one-on-ones with everybody that is my direct report, and then we've got that team meeting right square in the middle of the week, and so we always feel like we're pretty connected.
Right. Yeah, I love that. And are you sharing the things that you guys are talking about as a team with, other people in the company as you go along?
Yeah, we have really gotten a lot better with that since I've started. There was not a lot of that happening, and I think we realized that one, I mean, we obviously want to show the value of marketing, but two, like there are just so many things happening. We're expecting everybody to keep up with us, but we're not even keeping up with them.
Mhm.
And
Right.
so, like simple thing, right? Like we've got a Slack channel, marketing updates. So if we've got something going out, or if we've launched something, or a new asset is produced, or some other outcome that affects other departments, we drop it in there immediately. Boom, boom, boom. Right. So that's more of like the ad hoc thing. And then, I was just talking about that meeting in the middle of the week. Usually, the way we're set up, the president CRO who I report to is in our office, and so I would say 9 times out of 10, she's sitting in that meeting with us.
Right.
And that's great because I don't have to fill her in separately, right? In our one-on-one, number one. But two, she's able to eliminate a lot of those roadblocks that we may have, whether that's knowledge based or priority based or whatever it is. And so that really makes our team more agile by doing that. And so I think that's worked quite well.
Cool. Cool. I love that. Yeah. Last question here, Drew. Generally speaking, what advice would you give to marketing managers who aspire to become directors or VPs in the future?
The advice I would give is really get to know yourself and understand what you're good at or what you want to be good at. And there are a few non-negotiables that I think you need to set up in your mind in terms of what those things are. I found myself, one of my mistakes early, I was almost willing to bend and flex to just be a part of certain situations or get a job, right? Whether that's because it's a cool company to work for, or it's more money, or I just think on paper it sounds like a better fit. And the reality is you need to hold yourself to a high standard of what job you're going to take on because it's such a big part of your life, right? And
Mhm.
if you're not happy, you're going to leave anyway. Even if you're making more money, you're going to leave, and that trade-off's not worth it. So know what your non-negotiables are, know what's important to you, and I think really think deeply about the kind of questions that you want to ask leadership or your hiring manager, who you're going to report to. Make sure you have enough context for what you're stepping into. Really think about those questions deeply because you can tell a lot about the health of the business, the communication, the culture if you're asking the right things.
Well, Drew, it's been great chatting with you. Really appreciate all the awesome insights that you've given our way. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate the time, man.
Hey guys, today I'm interviewing Drew Brucker, the VP Growth at Lasso. I'm getting his story as to how he went from a sales rep for the St. Louis Cardinals all the way up to a marketing leader. I'm going to get his top tips on leadership, the traits of a marketing leader, and even things as to how to manage up and how to do internal marketing. Hope you guys enjoy.